All right, good afternoon. I am ready to get started on a ridiculously complicated, crazy project that I have been working on for, actually I've been working on it for a while. I'm just now making the video for it. I should point out that my wife likes to tell me how insane I am when it comes to the projects I work on and how complicated they are and how just absolutely just ridiculous they are in terms of the amount of work that I put into them. But I'm going to start out by talking about, let's see, I'm going to talk about, yeah, this is the right one. One of the projects that one of the pages of the SketchUp packet that I do at my school that I have students do. And here is the page. And this is what inspired me to do this fairly ridiculous project, which at this point is coming along pretty well. It's not done, but I've got enough that I can make a video and get started on the video and show you some pretty cool stuff. I'm pretty happy with the progress. So I'm going to start by taking a circle here. I'm going to put it on the ground here, and I'm going to change the number of sides to a lot of sides to make it particularly smooth around the outside edge. Second of all, I'm going to take a polygon. I'm going to do the same thing, and it's already 6 sides, which is what I want anyways. So I've got a circle and a polygon. I'm going to delete these interior surfaces, and I'm going to use a rectangle tool, draw a shape going up in this direction like this, and then I'm going to draw an interesting shape here. Oh, let's just keep it fairly straightforward. And I'm going to delete this edge and that edge. Something's wrong here. Whoop. It is not coplanar. For those of you who've done this project before, you should have recognized something was wrong there. Let's keep it real simple. There we go. And now it worked just fine. I want to keep that circle. Okay. I'm going to take this shape here, and I'm going to move a copy of it to the middle of this one. Wondering how many of my students have any clue what I'm about to do, but it's going to be kind of cool. Here we go. I'm going to click here, I'm going to click here, and I'm going to do that. And I have made a vase form of some sort. Okay. Now I'm going to do this, and this basically represents a vase form similar to what I did before. It's all circular, it's nice and beautiful. I could definitely build that by throwing these different portions in coil building and all the things that I did in my last video. And this could be done. It'd be pretty straightforward. However, if I do this and this and this, I have a much more difficult form for me to build. This form would involve a lot of slabs. I'd probably build this with 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 18 different slabs is what I could build this with. But this is the task that I have undertaken. I did the large pot that was thrown, and that's on the other video which you can watch. This one is going to be an entirely different process. It's not going to involve the wheel at all. It's all going to be done with a form of it's all going to be done with slabs. Okay, so that's what I'm basically working on. And I started out by coming up with a form that I liked. Boop, and there it is. So there is the vase that I am going to make. Oops, little sneak peek of something over there on the right-hand side. So this is what I originally created, and I did so I created it the same way you just watched me create this one over here. And I created this form. The next step involved needing to find out. I needed to know what well, I'll just show you. I'll show you what I did. Scooch, scooch, scooch. You can see that these are basically these these forms are the silhouettes of each of the 6 different sides, because this thing is 6-sided. 1, 2, 3. It has 6 sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-sided. And this is the silhouette of what that looks like, what those forms look like. So I created this first by drawing a line down the middle and then connecting each of those corners. And actually I could do that on the original one. I can show you what that looked like. Zoom over here. And I'll show you how I could do that on this form over here if I wanted to. I can delete this top edge. I can take, maybe I can find the midpoint and come straight down. And from this midpoint, if I have it correct, I can go here. Oops. Which one was that? That was kind of, let's see. If I'm looking at it straight, it's back and a little bit to the right. Oops, that is not correct because you can see that it did not go through that line. Let's try it this way instead. Actually, I can do this, and I can go from the midpoint up is what I'm going to do. And then from this, I can go across here, which will locate this spot for me right here. I can do that. I can do that. And on the bottom, I'm just going to draw them all in. From the center, I'm just going to draw it all in. Draw all those and all these. And then I'm going to erase this. And if I delete this, I can click on this, copy and paste, and just like that, I have that silhouette. And there's 6 of them. And I could actually recreate that thing over there by going like this, finding that top corner, which is right there, clicking it. Oops, Control Z, that did not work. Control Y. Select this thing. I'm doing too much. I really should not be. Okay, Control copy it, and that is 360 divided by 6 is 60 degrees times 5. There you go. Okay, so there is basically this object showing all of those different planes. All right, so let's go back. So I have this thing created now. Okay, but my intention is to have, I want this middle one as well, the shape that is basically going to be, if I take this thing and I connect this across here and I connect this to the middle to here, I want this shape. And that's what I did here. So I took the shape before and I connected all those spots from here to here, here to here, everywhere there was a line, I connected it all. And thus I created this whole panel here. And that allowed me to create this panel here. So now I have this panel and this panel and this panel. And the next thing I did is where it really gets kind of into the engineering and it's kind of cool. I took those 3 panels and I put them in the correct angles and I lined them up correctly so that when you look at it straight on, in fact, if I go to View, Camera, Standard Views, anyways, if I put it in the right perspective here, the middle one disappears and you can kind of see it all. But it's not showing that because the computer shows it in 3-dimensional perspective, which screws it around. But one way or the other, this is basically a flat line going across from here. It's flat. It's a flat panel. So I put these things in place. I also gave them thickness. You'll see that this is 1/8 of an inch thick. That's because the material I'm going to be using is going to be 1/8 of an inch thick that I'm going to be talking about in a moment, and I'll have a video for you showing you what that looks like. It's about 1/8 of an inch thick. So that's why I actually gave it physical dimension, because I'm actually going to make these 3 pieces. Okay? And then I did this. I took those 3 pieces and I created an understructure to hold them in place so that I could have these things sitting in reality. It's all 1/8 of an inch thick material. I can have this. This is the object I'm going to try to create. Or actually, forget trying to create. I have already created this item, and I will show you that in the next part of this video. But this is a physical form that I could lay a slab of clay on, and then I could use it not only to cut out the right shape from this perspective, but I can also slice it at the angle. I can cut it at this angle right here, which means that later on when I'm putting it together, all those angles will already be cut. I think that may be where I ended this video. Nope. So from all of these things that I created, I then created all of these. And these are basically silhouettes of what I want to cut out. Okay. So if I cut all of these things out of 1/8" material, which 10 years ago would have been an insurmountable amount of work. It would have been ridiculous for me to try to take a pencil and draw all these things and use a bandsaw and sanders and just tools that would have been very difficult to use. Sorry that my dog is barking in the background here. He does not like the mailman. This would have been an insurmountable amount of work, but instead, all I have to do on each one of these things is to put them in exactly straight position so that I am looking at it straight on, and then I can file, export a 2D graphic, and it will export what's called a PDF. Why is it showing a JPEG? I wonder if I'm not in PDF. I export a PDF. From the PDF, I am able to close this, and there's going to be a bunch of PDFs on this screen here somewhere. They're all right here. Well, anyways, there's a bunch of PDFs here, and then I open them up in Inkscape, which is another program, and I export them as an SVG. I know I'm getting too complicated here for you, but in the end, I'm able to upload those into my Glowforge account. And anyways, I'm able to upload these images and laser cut them out of material. Okay? So I am now going to move to my other video source, and I'm going to show you what this looks like now that it's all been cut out. All right. All right, so I used my laser cutter to create all those pieces. I worked in this material, which you can get at Home Depot. It's, I'm forgetting what it's called. It's called the draft board, or it's whatever that is. I use that material. It's 1/8 of an inch thick. I know how to cut it on the laser, and it works really nicely. And I use that to create that. You can see it's the same form that I had designed on the computer. It's all in there. When I originally put this thing together, I for some reason thought that it was just going to snap in place and be nice and strong, but it really was not. It was really floppy. And so I started laser cutting out all these little pieces of wood, and with a lot of hot glue and a lot of these little 90-degree squares, I was able to really get this thing pretty darn solid. I then put a layer of cardboard over the top of it, which I did not want to be too thick, so this is pretty thin cardboard. It's about 1/16 of an inch thick. And I smoothed out the whole thing. So now I can take a slab and put it on top of here and then cut out that shape. Like I needed to go to the high school and use their nice slab roller they've got to cut out a bunch of slabs. And I was going to hang out there, but then I thought, you know what, I'm not being responsible. I should be staying home. I should be showing my students that they can, in fact, get things done around the house with things that they've got around their house. They don't have to have this fancy equipment that I've got. And therefore, I came up with this concept of using a very heavy roll. This is something I had around the house. I understand you don't have this around your house, although I'm not going to be asking you to be doing some sort of a slab project like I am. This is a counterweight from my raku kiln that I built in my garage. It's currently in my garage. I went into my garage to see if there's anything in there that was cylindrical that I could fill with concrete, and then I found that I had already done that in the past. I had this counterweight, which is something that I use to lift the top of my raku kiln off of the from the base of the raku kiln. So basically, I just had a big, giant, fat weight in my garage, which has worked rather nicely. It's sitting on a 3/4 inch piece of wood, and this piece of wood right here and that one over there are about 1 inch, and actually they're exactly 1 3/8 inches because I cut them myself. So originally I put clay on this board here without this wood here, and I rolled it out into a slab, and so that slab would have been 1 3/8 minus minus 3/4, so that's 5/8 of an inch thick. So I originally rolled out a slab that was 5/8 of an inch thick, but 5/8 is too thick for this slab. I don't want this pot to be so ridiculously heavy. So once I had rolled out the slab to 5/8 of an inch, I started adding pieces of wood underneath it, which basically lifted this board, which basically thinned out the board more and more and more. In the end, I think that I have made it too thin. You'll see I have 3 of those boards underneath there. So my 5/8 should be down to about 1/4 of an inch, but in reality, it's coming out more like 3/8 of an inch, which I think might be too thin. But one way or the other, I went through this entire process. I created a slab. I put the slab on top of that form. I cut the form. Was really pretty happy with it, and there it is. So there is a slab. It's about 3/8 of an inch thick, and it is setting on a second form because I realized that I needed some place to be able to put these things. So I'm going to make 6 of these forms, and I'm going to set them on top of this form to let them dry out all together as 6 forms. So I used the other one of these that I made to cut out and to get, I don't know how easy it's to tell there's a bevel, there's an angle to that. So I cut out this form, I let it dry a little bit. Okay, so I had the clay sitting on here, and I cut it to these, I cut right along this edge to create that bevel, and I let it sit there overnight, and the next day it had shrunk down to that line. And I waited until, or it had shrunk. I waited until it felt stiff enough that I could pick it up, and then I drew the line right there to tell me how much it had shrunk. And that way, if I use this form to create all 6 of my sides, and I wait for them to shrink to that line before I move them, and then I move them back onto this, and then I stack them up onto this form here, and I cover them entirely in plastic, then they should stop shrinking. And then they will all have achieved a certain level of stiffness, enough that I can pick them up and move them. But at the same time, they will all be pretty close to about the same size and length. Becoming a very long, drawn-out process. Right now I'm drawing out this one on the form. I'm waiting until it gets down to that line underneath there. There's a little blue line. That'll tell me that it's shrunk the same amount as the others. I have to do 6 of these things. You see I have them over here. These are slabs that I've rolled out at this point. They're underneath here. They're all bigger than they're supposed to be, than they need to be. You can see that I have them underneath plastic to keep them wet. They're the right general shape, but they're not cut down exactly to the right shape yet. I have a damp towel sitting over plastic with more towels to weight it down, and clumps of clay sitting over here. So basically I've got slabs ready to go over here. I have a slab that I have beveled to just the right shape over here. And I'm drying them out. And then say hello, Bilbo. Hello, Bilbo. I'm pretty sure that the form is, in fact, I know the form is not going to be perfect on each of these, but I also know that they're still soft enough to be moved around a little bit, so that as I start building them on this form over here, which is the form I'm going to be using later on, I will reshape each one of them just before I put them on that form over there, because they're still movable. They're not so dry enough that they can't be moved. All right, so I've done a lot of work, a lot more than I anticipated. I suspect that once I've done one of these, I'll be able to accomplish this much simpler because I'll understand it a little better. I've been doing it in a very difficult, very careful, methodical manner anticipating a lot of problems along the way. And it's been pretty straightforward at this point, but that's partially because I was so careful. I suspect that once I've done this once, that I'll understand it a little better and I can maybe do it a little easier in the future. All right, so I've got one of these forms outside drying right now. I'm going to take two of these forms and put it onto two of these shapes, put them on this form, get it ready. I'm going to soften up some edges, and then I'm going to bring in the one outside and put it in place. So here we go. Hey Megan, come help me. Okay, I'm definitely having failure here, and I'm going to need to figure out this thing, but I've still got these three slabs, and I'm going to put them over here while I try to figure out a better way to do this, because it's not really working. Can you, Okay, so last time around I had a bit of failure. So this time around I have, first of all, when I had that failure, I didn't panic. What I did was I said, okay, that's not gonna work. Something's wrong here. I need to preserve what I have and then shut down for a little bit and just think about it later. So I took all the pieces, I put them back on their forms, I covered them in plastic, and I let them sit. And I went to bed and I thought about it, and I came up with this really neat concept that I have, which is to use toothpicks to hold everything together as I'm sewing, as I'm putting it together, using toothpicks to hold it all together. And I tried that out. It seems to be very successful at this point. So at this point, I'm going to show you some of the steps that I've been doing that I haven't had on camera, and that involves these slabs. So over here, I have these. They've been sitting under a couple days. I have them covered in plastic and towels so that they wouldn't dry out. This is my last one. I've already done all the other ones just like I'm doing right now. So you're getting the video of that should be pretty successful because I've already done it a couple times. But I've got one slab remaining, which is completely just, so I rolled out the slab. I rolled out all the different slabs, and then I had one of them that was cut into the right shape, which is right here. So I cut out a template, I laid it out, and as you can see, I cut this significantly larger than my template. I just wanted to make sure, I wanted to basically remove all the excess clay so that I could reuse it to make the next slab. But I also wanted to make sure that this was plenty big enough for what I was doing. Okay, so now I've got one last soft slab, which is still soft, to work with, and I'm going to transfer this onto a form over there. I'm going to pick this up, and I'm going to lay it out on this form right here. I want to make sure that I am lining up well, that I have excess clay on both sides, and that I've done that correctly, and I think I have. Early on, I was being really paranoid about just making sure that this was nice and smooth and these corners were perfect. But at this point, I've done enough work on these things to know that there's a lot of time moving forward for me to be able to make changes and adjustments. So I'm going to lift this and put it up there on the table. So stand on up. I can get to the bottom better here. I'm not over here enough here, so I need to shift this over a little bit. There we go. Make sure that I have enough space all the way along both sides. Do what I'm about to do here, which is, if you come down here, Jasper, come down underneath so you can see underneath. I'm going to put this right here. See how I'm pushing this up against this edge? I'm actually cutting that bevel, that angle on the form as well. See that there's an angle here. And it's the correct angle for, it's actually 60 degrees is what it is, because there's 6 sides, it's 360 degrees to a circle. So I'm going to cut this at that angle. All the way along. Make sure we're right up against that edge. And as I was pointing out earlier, last time around I was much more careful about this kind of stuff. The fact this goes up slightly probably shouldn't bother me at all. In fact, I'm just going to leave it. I was being much more careful in the past. Nowadays, I recognize that there's, as you'll see later in this video, there's a lot of cleanup to do along the way. That means that I don't need to be as persnickety as all that. This one, I used to cut them like this, at this angle like that. That's how I was originally doing them. But at some point I screwed one of them up. So at this point I'm leaving a 1/2 inch here. I want to leave a 1/2 inch over here. Turn around behind, let's come this way. A 1/2 inch right along here. So I'm actually going to cut this. I'm cutting them at this point I'm cutting this at leaving a 1/2 inch across the top, and I'm cutting them at a 90-degree angle to here is what I'm doing. And that's because at some point I cut one wrong, and then I decided I needed to make them all the same. I did differently this time around. This time, I've dried them out more significantly at this point, so they're no longer floppy at all. And because they're no longer floppy, I no longer need the support structure underneath it that I was using before. So at this point, I have put these things right here on the ground and stuck them down to a board with the intention that that would hold them and keep them from flaying out that direction and kind of hold them where they are. I've also, at this point, I noted that the bottoms were getting, I could actually see that they were turning the wrong color. I can see that they're softer now. They were drying out at the bottom. They tend to dry out at the top and the bottom faster than along the edges. So this next step, as you can see, I've scored those edges really well. And I'm going to take some napkins and some water, and I'm going to put napkins on the edge, just like I did down there, to soften up that edge, so that most of the structure will remain pretty stiff, but the edge will get softened up so that I can work with it. And the form that is outside right now, drying in the sun, I will need to soften up that edge as well and score that edge. And the next time I'm going to be working on this, I'll have that third piece, which will be nice and solid and strong. It will have shrunk the same amount as these ones. And hopefully, I've checked this measurement here. It's pretty close to where it's supposed to be. I've checked this measurement here, and I've determined that that's where it's supposed to be. That one seems to be a little short, which makes me nervous, except for the fact that I think this is still somewhat movable. I can pull that out. Okay. So at this point, I have my third thing dried out to the point where it shrunk to the right amount. It's interesting, it's a little floppier than these ones were, and I think that's because these ones were setting in this form overnight where they dried more evenly, and they've created a certain amount of rigidity that I'm not getting on the other one. But if I let the other one shrink more in an effort to try to make it more stable, then I run the risk of it potentially being the wrong length to fit. All right, so something interesting I did here is I wanted to have like slip And this is, as you can see, it's just kind of a thick mud. And that's not necessarily easy to always have. If you just take wet clay and add water to it, it's kind of hard to get down into this consistency of just kind of like mud. And then I remembered that if you take clay that is completely bone dry and you put it in a bucket of water, it'll turn to mud pretty quickly. Whereas if you take wet clay and you put it in a bucket of water, you would think it would turn to mud faster because it's already along the way of being wet. But the reality is it's the opposite. If you take wet clay and you put it in a bucket of water, it'll stay kind of a wet kind of clump for long periods, for a very long time. And it's kind of hard to get it to turn into this. So I went out onto the deck and I found some clay that had been sitting in the sun, and I was able to fairly quickly get it to turn down into actual just kind of thick mud. And I think this is going to be nice. So I'm going to put this slip here. I'm not going to put slip on the other one because it'd be hard to put it. It's over here. If you take a look over here, here's the other form, which I'm going to rotate around this way and then drop in place. Well, that actually worked out pretty well. Now I've been pretty careful about trying to get these things to the right distances. Okay, so it's setting pretty well right now. And this was my real kind of what I considered my master stroke, or my smart decision I made, which was using these toothpicks. Because I'm going to use this toothpick here I'm going to drive that right into, oh man, this one's a little stiffer. I'm going to drive that into here, which is going to kind of sew that together a little bit. I'm not going to do that the whole way up. I'm just going to do that every few inches. And I'm not saying every one of you should be doing this, because hopefully you're not going to need to do this when you're working on the assignment that I have you doing for my class, because you shouldn't need to do this much effort. But I'm just showing you this concept of problem solving. I had an issue and I needed to solve that problem, and I can go from either direction. It's going to be easier to drive this way because this is softer. I had this, not sure whether the last point in this video I had this thing done, but I had this covered in wet paper towels along this edge in an effort to soften. So this edge right here and this edge right here are really pretty soft. Now what I'm saying to you guys is, because you're likely, if you're going to be doing something like this, you're going to be working on something much smaller than this, you should not really need to be using toothpicks to hold these things together. I've got a long area to kind of line up, and I'm using this to kind of hold it while I go. Now all that's hopefully going to be held together to a good extent while I do the other side as well. So now these toothpicks are going to kind of hold everything in place. Now when I first started working on these things, I was being really just very careful and making these edges just nice and straight, because I imagined in my head that I was going to be basically trying to line these things up perfectly, and if they were beautiful and straight, that they would just naturally be better. But now I've realized that I can easily do stuff like this. This line right here is where it's likely to crack later on. I'm going to actually gouge out a section right here. Fairly significant section. That. I'm going to scratch that up a little bit. Actually, I'm not sure that's a good idea. I'm going to take a coil and I'm going to put that in there. So basically, I've taken a third bit of clay, which is going to connect. I basically turned this into like three pieces. I have this piece, I have this piece, and I have a third piece, which kind of, my idea is to try to take what would normally be considered the weak spot, which is this line right here, and strengthen it by put an actual like piece of clay like right there along that edge. Okay. Now, I'm going to end the video in a second here, not right now. But the next time I'm going to have this video, I will have done this all the way along. I will have really just made sure this is secure. But I'm also going to do something on the inside. Sven or Jasper, go stand over there for a second. I'll show you what I'm going to be doing here. Oops. I'm also, yeah, go down here. I'm going to scratch this up here. I'm going to take, and I'm going to put clay on the inside. Now, most of my vase, you're not going to be looking at the inside of my vase. So this whole area down here will have these coils on the inside, which will basically add, once again, structure to the locations where it's more likely to come apart later. Now up here in the lip, up in this area here, before the whole thing is dry and before I'm done, once the whole thing is kind of together as a vase, I will take time to clean up this line and try to make it look good. But I'm only going to be worrying about from about here to about here, just whatever I can see. So there'll be a lot of this on the underside of this in areas where you won't be able to see it. And that is there just basically because if this thing cracks, it's going to crack somewhere on this line. Okay, so there you go. There is the second half. I have the other half on another table. As you can see, I've made a giant mess of my living room, and that's what I'm going to be working on now, is cleaning up my living room. This object, I'm going to let dry out a little bit right now. Then I'm going to cover it in plastic, just like the other one is right now. The other half is currently covered in plastic. I did it yesterday, and maybe the day before. I think I did it yesterday. And I covered it in plastic, and it's been sitting there covered in plastic. I'm going to want this to get just real solid, and I want it to hold its shape, because the next thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to tip this up on its end, on the correct end. I'm going to tip the other one up on its correct end, and I'm going to score and slip and stick this whole thing together just like that. Okay, so today I've got these two half shells. I started out by taking paper towel and wetting it and sitting it over this edge because the whole thing was really pretty stiff originally on, stiffer than I was a little worried about how stiff it was. I scored along this line, score, and I put an entire row of a bead inside there to give it extra strength in that spot. On the last two lines, I'm only going to be able to get it up as far as I can reach down inside. Actually, I should be able to reach from the bottom and from the top, but I'm probably not going to be going all the way along. So at this point, I have taken slip, which I still have left over from yesterday, which is basically just, I took the, well, that's earlier in the video. You can see how I made that slip, and I've slipped the entire surface. I've got saran wrap handy so that I can use that to try to hold things together. I've got toothpicks that I'm going to put right here so that I have them. And this is me putting together my big vase. I'm going to need my son Jasper to help me with that. So here we go. The nice thing is it's not slumping. which means that I'm pretty sure that from this position, I can work my way around the whole thing, kind of sewing the whole thing together as I go. If it starts to get wider, if I start to see that this line starts getting not straight, then I've got a problem, which means I've only got a certain amount of time to work. I have it pinned on the top. I wrapped it with cellophane or with saran wrap around the bottom to kind of hold the bottom together. I'm going to work my way down this side here and this side here to solidify it real quick. And then I think I'm going to turn the whole thing over and work my way up from the bottom. Okay, so I dealt with the top first. I've wrapped it up really well. I'm hoping that that top is strong enough to hold everything in place. Now from this position, pause that please. The bottom has been kind of damaged a little bit in that process. I'm going to need to open that up a little bit, scratch it up, get some slip in there. I'm going to try to square up this bottom. And from this position, you can see that it's kind of rolled a little bit. I'm going to actually add the bottom onto it as well, and then wrap this up in plastic and try to get it to set. So I have the top of this thing pretty well kind of cleaned up. I have it wrapped all the way just to that top edge because I want to let that edge dry out a little bit. Before I do so, I had one extra of these slabs. I had broken it up, laid that out flat, so this is already stiff because that's actually the first slab I did. I made it a little thin, so I decided to go ahead and make an extra 6, so I'd have an extra slab if I ever needed one. Looks like I will be using it for this purpose right here. It's a good thing to have around because it's already fairly dry, yet not. As you can see, it's pretty, oops, no, you can't see that. It's still pretty soft. So I can add that to the bottom is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take this slab, I'm going to add that to the bottom, and then I'm going to cover the whole thing really well and let it kind of dry evenly is what I'm going to do. So at this point, I have added the bottom to it, and I actually had to put a significant amount of effort into getting it level. You'll see that it's not completely cleaned up right now. I am just kind of gonna let it set for a bit. I also see that there is some stuff that needs to be fixed. But right now I'm gonna let the bottom kind of get solidified. The top I still think is pretty good. When I flipped it over, I was really careful to set it down very carefully. And it definitely, I have a feeling that the top and the bottom are going to get really nicely set and solid. And then I'll unwrap it, work out the entire form, kind of clean the whole thing up, and then I'm gonna put a trash bag over it and let it sit for a day or two or maybe 3. I don't know. I'm gonna let it sit for a bit and let it kind of even out. And then I'll take a look inside, take a good look at it, see if there's anything going on. If there's nothing going on, then I'll probably let it dry out nice and slowly, or just let it dry out in the house. Okay, so I have been successful. I am pretty darn happy with my vase. And there is my vase. Now, when I say that I'm successful, I mean that I have put together this vase, and there is no real reason why I should imagine that it's going to crack. However, I am going to be just really careful. Go ahead, give me just a slow spin. I'm actually curious as to whether or not, if you spin it really slowly, whether or not it's going to appear to be straight. I was thinking that it might actually be a little wonky, but at the moment, it looks pretty straight actually. I leveled it really well. I used the leveling app on my phone. There you go, that's good, thank you. So that thing is designed to fit into the kiln once again. However, this is going to easily fit in the kiln. The height is pretty close to a full kiln. I think it's 30 inches tall, but it's not 30 inches wide. It's about 22 inches wide, I'm guessing. I should have measured before I made this last video. but it's a pretty good sized video, or a pretty good sized pot. And I'm really pretty happy with the size of it and the shape of it. I particularly enjoy very much the fact that this thing started at a computer with me sitting down at SketchUp and just coming up with a concept and then creating it and then going from there. There is a certain amount of ridiculousness to the amount of process that I've gone through. However, some of that process can easily be gotten rid of in the future, meaning I now have learned how I would do this in the future. If I wanted to make another one, it would be a lot easier to make than this first one. The first one I had to go really carefully, and I almost expected catastrophe along the way, and I did experience catastrophe, but I learned from that catastrophe. I stepped back, I put everything away, I salvaged what I had, and then I went to sleep thinking about it until I came up with the concept of the toothpicks, which really did make a big difference. So I hope you enjoyed the ridiculousness that was me creating this vase. I can actually tell you something that really brings me quite a bit of joy is that at Washington High School, where my students go to, they do have a Glowforge laser cutter, and in the future it will be there, which means that a student who could watch this video, a ceramic student, somebody who maybe had me in the past and likes to design things, maybe somebody in their engineering program has ceramics, and they could watch this video and use this as a concept, and they could absolutely make something like this, but their own, at Washington High School. It's a really lovely combination of engineering and building and creating and computer work and just old-fashioned slab building of ceramics, which has been being done for thousands and thousands of years. All right, I hope you enjoyed my video. Thank you for watching.